Business 140, Personal Financial Planning with Professor Joe Lane. We're in Unit 2. We just finished Chapter 5. You bought yourself a home now, got you a couple of cars, and we talked about some things that were important with that. Chapter 6 and 7, we're going to be talking about something else, kind of specific, like we were talking about specific assets that you could buy and what you should consider when you buy a car or you buy a home. In Chapter 6 and 7, we're going to be talking about credit. Two types of credit. One, what we call open account credit, and we'll explain that in just a minute. And then Chapter 7, I think, has to do with consumer credit. I will mention to you that mini assignment, MINI assignment number 2, are a couple of problems out of Chapter 6 and a couple of problems out of Chapter 7 that you have to, in essence, work or do. And that's mini assignment 2. At the end of your study notes for Unit 2, I have for you those mini assignments. I have you the mini assignment, and then I have the sheets out of the textbook that will help you complete those mini assignments. Okay, so even if you don't have a textbook, you can still do the mini assignments. 2 questions out of Chapter 6, 2 questions out of Chapter 7. You can still do the mini assignment without the textbook. I have it for you. All right. We, in Chapter 6, we're going to be talking about something evil. Now, I know you think, why do we start getting into evil? Well, let me show you. Ta-da! Credit card. A credit card. Are credit cards evil? Wow. Some people would tell you, I never have a credit card. No, don't even get near me, stay away from me. Well, we're going to find out in personal financial planning. I looked around, I thought I still had my personal financial planner up here, but I had to erase him to put some other stuff. Credit cards are not evil. Credit cards can be used by personal financial planners if they use them correctly. They're okay. Incorrectly, they can be a real problem, but they're nice. They're nice. They're not evil or anything like that. Used properly. If you're looking at this and you're saying, it looks like you must have covered up the numbers on your credit card. Yeah, well, I did. When you do these videos, you have no idea where these videos are going to go or how much people are going to be able to see. So just to make sure that my credit card didn't end up buying some stuff that I wasn't aware of, just to be careful. So anyway, but we're going to be talking about credit cards in this chapter, then about something a little bit different in Chapter 7, but both dealing with credit. Okay, let me sit down. Let's get started with Chapter 6. Why use credit? Let's just pay cash for everything. That's really hard to do. There's some things that you're just normally going to use credit. Automobiles, credit. Homes, we're going to use credit. It says, I made a statement here, to pay for goods and services that cost more than we can take from our current income. Okay, so that could be. So I start this thing off with, what would be some reasons to use credit? To avoid paying cash for large outlays. If you're going to buy a home full of furniture, you probably can't pay cash for that. You're probably going to have to use credit. Maybe you just bought that new home, now you have to have some furniture. To meet a financial emergency. Now, as a personal financial planner, you should have an emergency fund. We'll get into that later on when we start talking about insurance and investments. But sometimes an emergency pops up, and that credit can be used. Number 3, for convenience. Are credit cards convenient? That can be a curse, but they're really easy to use, and they're convenient to use. That's another reason we use them. And then the fourth reason I listed here was investment purposes. Okay, let me tell you, that's true, but not now. Interest rates on investments are so low, and rates of interest paid on credit cards are so high. That's not true. There was a time that could be the case where you actually could use a credit card to provide yourself money for investment purposes. But I'm going to leave it on here because it could happen, but not in this day and time unless it's an extraordinary situation. Right? But credit's okay. Sometimes we need to use credit. And especially the kind of credit we're going to talk about in Chapter 7, which is consumer credit. That's what we use to buy that furniture, to buy those appliances, stuff like that. But even Chapter 6, credit cards, sometime in case of an emergency, for convenience, for investment purposes. And I'll tell you something else. This credit card I have, periodically I get a statement from them. Well, I get my monthly financial statement, but I get a statement from them telling me a breakdown of how I expended my money on my credit card, that sort of thing. And that's really helpful for budgeting. I can see what different categories I use and how much with my credit card. So that it gives me some good financial information periodically. What is the reason you don't want to use your credit card? To live beyond your means. You can use credit to supplement your monthly income and allow yourself to live beyond your means for some period of time. But then it's going to come crashing down. So that's what we don't want to do. We don't want credit to get us in trouble. All right. There's something, as we're talking about this, I was looking, by the way, I just went all over this page, so I had to kind of number 1, 2, 3, 4 where I go. I want you to be familiar with some of the reasons that you would use credit cards. I want you to be familiar with what would be an improper use of credit cards, which would be living beyond your means. Establishing credit. There's something that I want you to know. You see down here where it talks about how much credit can you stand? There's something called the 5 C's of credit. And the 5 C's of credit are the way that bankers and other financial people evaluate your credit worthiness. And I want you to know the 5 C's of credit. And I know you're probably thinking, well, why didn't you put them down there on your handout? Well, I'll tell you in a minute. The 5 C's of credit are this. Lenders often look to the 5 C's of credit as a way to assess the willingness and ability of a borrower to repay a loan. The 5 C's of credit are this: a person's character, a person's capacity, a person's collateral, a person's capital, and condition. Now, if you're writing really, really fast, wait, he went too fast. If you have printed out your Unit 2 study notes, at the end of those Unit 2 study notes is our mini assignment number 2 on credit. One of the problems that you have to do is a gentleman wants to borrow some money, and you have to evaluate his credit worthiness. And in those documents, those sheets that I gave you to do your mini assignment number 2, I made you a copy of this page. So I want you to know the 5 C's of credit, but even again, if you don't have a text, if you go to and you should hopefully have your study guide study notes sitting next to you right now. You've printed them out so you can use them as we're going through this video. But you'll have that at the end of those study notes as a part of your mini assignment number 2. But here's the deal. I'll talk about it for a minute since it's a no, and then I'll move on. Evaluating a person's credit worthiness. The 5 C's of credit. Character. What's a person's character? Is that important? It really is. It really is. Number 2, capacity. The ability of the borrower to service the loan in a timely fashion. I got great character. I want to borrow some money, but I don't have a job or any way to pay it back. I don't have capacity. Number 3, collateral. Something of value that's used to secure a loan that the lender can claim in case of a default. Many times, if I want to borrow money for a car, I want to borrow money for a four-wheeler, I want to borrow money for some appliances, I would pledge those things as collateral. What that means is, if I don't pay the loan, they come get my appliances, they come get my car. So, if you have collateral pledged against the loan, which is usually what you're borrowing for, then that gives the person's lending you the funds some security. They've got something they can get to try to get their money back. Number 4, capital. The amount of unencumbered assets owned by the borrower, used as another indication of the borrower's ability to repay the loan. I want a loan to, I want to make out a loan for something. They can look and see if there's any collateral that might be available, but also this capital, what do I have? You're talking about unencumbered assets. What assets do I have that I don't owe anything on? What if I've got a fairly nice car and it's paid off? What if I've got a boat and I don't owe anything on it? So I've got some pretty nice assets there. So if I borrow money and I don't pay it back, they've got some assets that they could come to seize if they had to. And condition. Condition doesn't have to do so much with me as the borrower, it has to do with just the economic condition. The extent to which the prevailing economic conditions could affect the borrower's ability to service a loan. And I don't want to continue to go back to COVID-19, but I just feel such pain for people that had good jobs, that maybe were doing personal financial planning, and who would ever thought of something like this happening? And the economic conditions is just being so terrible for them. And it may be for you, and I have empathy for that. That's a terrible situation. That's truly one of those that's no fault of my own. I was watching a news story last night on TV. A fellow was some type of a night supervisor at the international airport in Atlanta. Sounded like a pretty nice job. Well, airfares and airport transportation's down about 80 or 90%. He lost his job. He was talking about not only when he lost his job, after so long he lost his insurance. And he said, now I went from having a nice job, a good job with a great company. I mean, the International Airport Authority in Atlanta, that's going to be around for a while. And now he had no insurance, and was really, really struggling, and then came up, as you always will, with some health issues. So, I see people like that, and it's like, who would have thought a pandemic? I mean, who would have thought? And so that's a very difficult thing. So the condition, but I kind of digress, but those things really concern me about folks. But he's just saying that a lot of times when you're going to evaluate whether a person can pay back a loan or not, borrowers, lenders, the people who are lending the money, they use the 5 C's of credit. So I want you to know what the 5 C's of credit are. I want you to be able to know each one and maybe write me a little sentence about each one. And you have this information at the bottom of your Unit 2 study guides. Okay, let's move on. Credit cards are what's called open account credit. Now what does that mean? With a credit card, you get the credit before you make the purchase. I have credit right here in my back pocket that if I want to go down to the mall and make some purchases, I can do so. That's called open account credit. The credit, this credit card company is saying, hey, we're giving you credit to go buy stuff, whatever it is. Now, most credit cards, I want you to know what open account credit is. Most credit cards come with a credit limit. The credit limit is so much. Once you hit this particular limit, then you cannot put any more credit on that. You cannot put any more purchases on that credit card. And by the way, side note here, you don't want to be hitting limits on credit cards unless those limits are mighty, mighty low. But that's what that's what a limit is. Couple of other things down here. I'm at number 4, bank credit cards. The most common type of credit card, open account credit, is a bank credit card, a Visa card, a MasterCard, that sort of thing. American Express, bank type credit cards. Those are the most common credit cards. All right. When you're looking at those credit cards, you know, they have a credit limit on them, like you say. And there's a couple of other things. Whenever you do something on credit, there's something called the APR, annual percentage rate. The lender has to give you what the APR, the annual percentage rate is on the credit which you are using. I started to say I'll find that for us in a little bit as we go on through. APR, annual percentage rate. Just be familiar with that. Annual percentage rate. The lender has to disclose to you what the APR is, annual percentage rate is, like on your credit card. Do you know the annual percentage rate on your credit card? You should. You should. Okay. When the next time your credit card comes in, your monthly bill comes in, it's going to tell you what your annual percentage rate is. Read what your annual percentage rate is. And you're usually going to have 2 annual percentage rates. Here's annual percentage rates for purchases. Here's the annual percentage rate if you go out into like mine went blank. Not a good time when you're on film. When you're doing it in advance. When you're getting money, like out of an ATM machine, something like that, when you're getting a cash advance. Usually the annual percentage rate on cash advance is greater than on just a regular purchase. Okay? But you need to know what your APR is. You're going to be shocked if you don't know. It's pretty high. It's pretty high. Okay. Speaking of that monthly statement, I'll talk about a couple of things here. You get a monthly statement. Should you examine it? Make sure that there's no charges on there that you aren't aware of? Yes, you need to do things like that. It's going to have on there the minimum monthly payment. This is the minimum monthly payment that you need to pay. Should you be paying the minimum monthly payment? No! What should you be paying? The balance. You want to keep credit cards paid off. Now you might hit a situation, we told you, I mentioned to you that you may have an emergency. Let's say that you were doing your personal financial planning and let's say you needed new tires. All of a sudden you had a tire blowout, you needed new tires. You didn't even know it. You hadn't budgeted for it. You were amazed. You had no idea they were in such a bad shape. So you had to put those new tires, your emergency fund, just because of some other things that had been happening, your emergency fund just wasn't enough to cover it. Or you hadn't established that emergency fund yet. So you put those tires on your credit card. All right. Your credit card probably has an interest rate of 12, 14, 15, 16%. That's pretty high. But what you may have to do, you may not be able to pay that credit card off in 1 month because of the size of that purchase. You may have to wait 2 months. You may have to do it over 2 or 3 months. But don't string it out. Don't do minimum monthly payments. Get that off of there as soon as possible. Okay. You don't want to pay the minimum monthly payment. You really want to pay it off. And if you can't pay it off in 1 month, pay it off. You know, most people have $10,000 plus credit card debt. Wow, isn't that something? That's something. Most people live paycheck to paycheck. See, what you want, many times what students say, you know, and when I talk about, you know, the good life, I want financial security. I don't want to live from paycheck to paycheck. You know, I don't want to owe everybody. I want something better for my kids than I had. I had it pretty good, but I want something even better for them. You know, I don't want to be worried about debt all the time. That's what personal financial planning does. That's what it does. It helps you get out of that. All right. So anyway, you want to try to pay off the balance on that thing. When you get that monthly statement, it'll say the balance is $500. It'll say due date that you have to pay. You have to pay it by August the 30th. Now, when you may get it on August the 10th. This is called a grace period. You have used that credit card. You have bought stuff with somebody else's money, so to speak. You've used their credit that they've extended to you. But if you pay that off within the grace period, you get no interest. Even though that money's been paid out, they charge you no interest during the grace period. So I want you to be familiar with what a grace period is. So here's what you want to do with a credit card, like the one I had in my pocket. You want to pay, you know what the annual percentage rate is because they have to show that to you. You want to check out your statement, make sure it's correct. You want to pay the balance of that if at all possible. That's what you want to do. And you want to pay it before the due date during the grace period where you're charged no interest. Okay. I'd be familiar with those things. Now there are some, and I listed them here for you, reward cards and affinity cards. There are some type of special type credit cards. Mine is not. Mine's just a regular credit card. A reward card is one of those cards that in using it, you get some type of bonus is not the word. Let me see if I can come up with what would be the word that I want to use. Incentive. I knew there was a word I was looking for. Some like frequent flyer miles or like cash back, something like this. Reward cards. And you know, I've had a couple of people ask me, have you ever thought about a reward card? And the answer is, I have a time or two, and it may be something that I change to. That came up again just the other day, and I may look at going with a rewards card. But a reward is where you get some type of incentive for using that card. Now that doesn't mean it's an incentive that you have to build up a balance on it. You don't want to do that, you want to pay it off. But just in the use of it, such as frequent flyer miles or cash back. The other type of a card is called an affinity card. An affinity card is a card that's tied to some type of charitable organization, some type of organization where they get a small percentage based upon your purchases and everything. So just be familiar with, there are some special types of cards that benefit you in you know, like a rewards card, or can benefit others with an affinity card, which is a card where you will give. You could get an affinity card, say, to support. I don't know. I don't think Delta Community College has an affinity credit card. But if they did, a little small portion of your purchases, the company would make a payment to Delta Community College. All right. The second type of charge card or open account credit are retail charge cards. A Kohl's card, a Dillard's card, a Sears card, a card like that. If you think the interest rates are high on an open account bank credit card, because these are bank credit cards, wait till you see your interest rate. If you've got a retail store card, the next time the monthly statement comes in, look at it. 24, 25, 26, 27%. They are really, really, really high. I don't have a retail charge card. It's from any type of an establishment. If I go in there, I'm just going to use my regular credit card. and I'm gonna pay the balance off. So if you've got a retail card with one of the local retailers around here, keep that thing paid off. Check that interest rate on that. Those are really, really high. Okay. Debit cards. I think we talked about this in an earlier chapter. It seems like we did, but what are debit cards, credit cards? I remember that conversation. No, debit cards are debit cards. It's like paying cash, because you give them the debit card, they take the money out of your checking account. There's no credit. So just be familiar with what a debit card is. They're not credit. It's charged against your checking account. It's just like paying cash. It's like a cash transaction. All right. I was just looking to see what else I wanted to mention. The main thing about credit, and I've got a couple other things to mention, but the main thing again about credit cards: open account credit. You get the credit before you make the purchase. Bank credit cards, retail charge credit cards, like retail establishment credit cards. A Capital One bank card, a Dillard's retail credit card. Interest rates are high on them. Pay attention to them. Keep those things paid off. And if right now, if you're just getting into personal financial planning, and you're just putting some money into savings, and I don't know anything about your personal finances whatsoever, but if you said, well, Professor Lane, I am now doing personal financial planning, and I am, for the first time, saving money periodically, and I'd like to know what maybe is something I should do with that money that I'm saving. The first thing I'd probably ask you is this. Well, number one, I'd probably say, it'd be a toss-up, not sure. I'd probably say, let's start an emergency fund. Or what I might even say, even above that, would be, do you have any credit card debt? And if you said yes, I'd say, use that money you're saving first to set up a financial goal to pay off your credit cards. So pay off your credit card debt, comma, and keep it off. Sometimes people will do a debt consolidation loan to pay off their credit cards, and the debt consolidation loan, the interest rate is less. So that's pretty cool. That wasn't a bad idea. Then they're running credit cards right back up. So now they got a debt consolidation loan they're having to pay, plus they're having to pay the credit cards, and that's where you lead into something we're going to be talking about at the end of this chapter. Okay. When you open a credit card, when you open an account, get a credit card, you've heard probably of a credit bureau. A credit bureau is what keeps up with your, has your financial information. You'll usually fill out a form and that sort of thing, and you'll be checked through the credit bureau as far as your credit worthiness. Now, how are they probably going to evaluate your credit worthiness? Well, to a large extent, it's going to be with those 5 C's of credit that we've talked about. And everybody knows today about your credit score. Keeping your credit score high. Is that a good idea? You betcha. You betcha. When you get ready to buy items of substantial size, you want to buy a car, you want to buy a house, or a lot of other things. You want to get a credit card. Your scores, or your credit score is very, very, very important. Let me see if I can, I know it's FICO, but let me see if I can remember or I can find the name of probably the largest credit scoring organization. I can almost make the statement that credit bureau, an organization that collects and stores credit information about individual borrowers. So you're going to get a credit report. You're going to get a credit report. Credit scoring, a method of evaluating an applicant's credit worthiness by assigning values to such factors as income, existing debt, credit references, and so forth. The largest provider of credit scores is by far Fair Isaac and Company, FICO. FICO, Fair Isaac and Company. Be familiar with that. Just be familiar with what credit scoring is. Just simply, just doing that. Give me a report card on your credit worthiness, and that the largest provider is Fair Isaac and Company, FICO. Okay. Personal financial planning gets you to do all the right things to get your credit score high. You keep your, you don't overspend, you don't get into financial problems, you pay your bills promptly, you do all the things that you need to do to keep that credit score up. Okay. I mentioned down here using credit wisely, shop around, get the best situation that you can with it. Now, credit card debt and just consumer credit debt is rampant in the United States. A lot of it is self-imposed, self-inflicted. People, there's a term called propensity to consume. What does that mean? That means I like to buy stuff. And if I can't find a way to pay for it, I'll put it on credit. That's not what you want to do. No. Now, do you want to live the good life? Yes. Do you want to? But and you can do that, but you've got to live within your means, okay, and build your wealth and do all those sort of things that we're talking about. Credit gets a lot of people in trouble, especially trying to live beyond their means. If you watch TV, if you look at billboards, if you're into social media, do you know how much there is in there about bankruptcy and bankruptcy attorneys? Hey, if around here, if I'm having problems, I'm going to call Sam, bankruptcy attorney. There are several attorneys, lots of attorneys that specialize almost exclusively in bankruptcy. Why do you think there's so many attorneys that specialize, their whole practice is bankruptcy? It's because there's a heck of a lot of people going bankrupt, which means it's a heck of a lot of people that's got financial problems. And again, I go back to this COVID thing. There's folks that are having problems now that shouldn't have problems. It shouldn't have happened to them, and I say it bothers me, But even before COVID, credit was, or misuse of credit was rampant, and people that can be financially independent, it's amazing how few are. Okay. So that being said, the last thing I want to chat about in this chapter is personal bankruptcy. If you get into a situation where you simply are not solvent, personal bankruptcy is a legal recourse. It's a legal way for insolvent debtors. It's a legal way for folks that are not financially solvent to be able to move forward. Okay? There's really two types of personal bankruptcy. And you'll hear them talk about it sometimes. There's Chapter 13 and there's Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Chapter 13 is what's called, and I want you to be familiar with this right here. That's why I wrote it up here for you. Chapter 13 is what's called a wage earner plan. It's restructuring your debt. Chapter 13, personal bankruptcy, Chapter 13, wage earner plan, is where you restructure your debt under a bankruptcy plan, normally using an attorney to do that. Chapter 7 is straight bankruptcy. You are insolvent to the point you ain't got nothing. So you do a straight bankruptcy, BR bankruptcy, not Baton Rouge. A Chapter 7, you wipe the slate clean. So I just want you to be familiar with personal bankruptcy, what it is. And I want you to be familiar with, there's two types. One is a restructuring bankruptcy, Chapter 13. The other is a wipe the slate clean, Chapter 7. I hope you don't, and if you get into good personal financial planning, you won't ever have to worry about this unless it's just extraordinary circumstances, again, like we've seen now, which could drive some people into this that would never have expected. But outside of something like this pandemic we have, people should never have to worry about dealing with something like this, because doing personal financial planning is going to keep them away from this. Okay, I think that is chapter 6 on personal financial planning as it relates to open account credit. Now we're going to talk about in chapter 7 consumer credit. It's still credit, but it's a little bit different kind. And so I'm going to take a short break. See who all has been calling me. You may have heard the cell phone ringing in the background. See who all has been calling me. And then I'm going to get back in just a few minutes, and I'm going to do chapter 7. Loud clap to show that chapter 6 has been completed.